Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm with the band man, and I'm going to try my best to introduce what was supposed to be this special or bonus episode, depending on how you want to look at it. So a little bit of context. You might have watched the first two, you might have skipped them. Kind of an idea that I had speaking with friend of the show, Chuck Coffey, aka Charlie Continental. There are times that we've talked about random topics before on the show or the things that have come up, and they were things that I thought warranted further conversation, whatever that meant. So the first bonus episode was Chuck coming on here talking all things ska. Again, right? I've listened to a little bit of ska. I have some working knowledge of ska. Didn't really know that much about it, as far as the roots and everything. And obviously, yeah, I can Google, I can do Wikipedia and all that stuff. I was kind of envisioning these to be somewhat like a TED Talk, right? So we dealt with that. And then the second one was Chucky plus one, kind of talking all things Americana and alt country and whatever that entailed. And again, that was one of those where I've heard alt country thrown around. I've heard Americana thrown around. I have some degree of working knowledge of what it is. I'm not really an expert. So bringing in two guys that are passionate about it, are interested in it, listen to a lot of it, have made music like that before, I thought made them great candidates for that. And again, that was an informative conversation, and I feel like I learned a lot. So now, kind of jumping ahead to what this episode is going to be about. My conversation with both Demian Johnston, and Shane Mehling, obviously, again, both friends of the show. Um, they had done noise bands. They were both in a Hemingway, and they've both done noise. And that noise project kind of took place between two of their band projects. And again, right, we had the conversation with both of them. Um, they discussed their noise projects. And again, right, like I have an idea in my mind. I think that I know what noise is. I've listened to noise albums, like I've bought some of Damien's solo CDRs that he's made available before. Like one of the things we're going to talk about during the purpose of this conversation is Merzbow, and like I'm familiar with the the conversation around Merzbow. Like I can't say that I've listened to him all that much. So I thought, hey, wouldn't it be great to bring on these two guys that are super passionate and super knowledgeable about noise and bring them in. As you're going to see, right? I started to edit this a little bit, and I was thinking about editing it pretty heavily to kind of rein it in a little bit. Um, but I think, especially after talking with Shane, and he's cool with the idea, this idea of noise as kind of um, a chaotic form of anti-music, like this outsider art, I think lends itself very, very well to this conversation that we had and the way the conversation was structured, right? Like you're going to see Shane immediately kind of starts asking questions to Damien, and we kind of just run right out the gates. And there's no real setup, there's no real tee off. We were talking a little bit before I hit record, but the moment that record happened, Shane kind of took it from there. We went on some side tangents. We went on a little bit of a down a rabbit hole or two or three or five. But I learned a lot about it. I don't necessarily know that I learned it in the way that you usually kind of have a conversation and a topic and a lecture, kind of whether that was a TED Talk or whether that was a school or university setting. But I think it was really good, and I think it's important for me to consider the fact that Damien and Shane are both true musicians. Like they are artistic, and they have a significant oeuvre of output that they've put into this world. And a significant portion of that has been noise, right? And again, kind of going with the conversation that you're about to listen to, hopefully, maybe, is this idea about, right, noise is outsider art. And I don't think it's an unfair opinion to say that Shane and Demian are very eccentric people. Again, right? They're true artists, they're musicians in every sense of the word. And I think that eccentricity is genuine, and I think it lends itself to the way that this conversation was structured. Also, I was joking with Shane, PSA, don't do drugs, kids. Um, that might have contributed, Damien and his vape might have contributed a little bit to kind of the unstructured narrative that we're about to experience. But again, right, I think that coincides very nicely with the nature and the type of music or anti-music, as we discussed, that noise is. So, this was my attempt to have a conversation with two people that are excited about, are knowledgeable about, and have produced noise and kind of what their experiences are, what got them into noise, what their creative and writing process is for that noise. And I think I get a slightly different opinion from both of them, even though they've created noise together and what that entails. And we even kind of went a little bit down for discussing how their existing writing process for Great Falls and then their writing process for noise and how they differ and how they kind of add textual noise, which isn't true isolated noise, and into the writing process for Great Falls songs. We talk a little bit about some of the other noise artists that they've run into. Discussed a little bit about maybe some of the more seedy, more violent, more uh, weirder aspects of noise. Um, but yeah, I think it takes an eccentric person to produce noise, and I think that this conversation ended up being very eccentric. And again, I just want to make sure that when I'm saying that they're eccentric, right, they're true eccentric people. They're not like people who come across as eccentric for the purposes of their image or giving the idea that they are a certain type of person or a certain personality for the purposes of conversation. Like, this is how they are. This is how the conversation happened. But I'm glad that we had this conversation. Again, right? Like, when we had these conversations with them before and they talked about noise, I nodded my head and I acted like I knew what noise is. And I kind of did sonically, I have an idea of what noise is. But now that we've discussed it more as an art form, and kind of what it means, how it differs from music, and again, just kind of going down that rabbit hole of outsider music and extreme music and music artistic expression on the periphery of what is generally accepted by the mainstream or by the public. Yeah, the more I think about it now and while I was editing this episode, um, it was a good conversation. So with no further ado, enjoy the slightly unhinged conversation I had with Shane Mehling and Damian Johnston, kind of discussing all things noise. And I hope you enjoy their TED Talk. And one final thing, I was trying to have four of these special episodes a year. We've already had one a year. This was the second one, which was supposed to land on 4th of July. It happened a little bit later. I kind of pivoted a little bit what my topic was going to be like. So I kind of approach them later in the game, and then just the very nature of trying to schedule both people to be on the same Zoom call at the same time. Scheduling is always a challenge for me, but I'm glad that we pulled this off. I hope you find it interesting or informative or amusing or whatever that might be. So hope you enjoy, and next week we'll have a normal guest with a slightly more structured uh episode. So hope you enjoy, and enjoy your week.
By far the worst is the hamburger. Give the last meal then you've been qualified technician. Qualified technician. The worst. Alternating nights when you're alternating unbelievably. She's lying there. Hamburger lady. Hamburger lady. She's lying and she's burned from the waist up. She's burned from the waist up. She's got no arm. Her ears are burned off and her nose. Her eyelashes and her fingers are burned. She can't hold anything. And the medical advances. There's no end in sight. The hamburger lady. When somebody tells you there's a level of pain beyond which the human mind, beyond which the level of pain, the hamburger lady on the coffee chair, unbelievably, burned from the waist down. That's what keeps her alive with the tubes. All the night nurse. The hamburger lady. Hamburger lady. He was okay when he changed the tubes in the legs, tubes in her arms, and he managed okay, and then he came out and he saw one of the burn nurses sat at the desk, and he was eating a can of chili mac, and he flashed on the carpet, and he flashed on the floor. And hamburger lady, stretched and she came through.
Demian, you are more the noise historian than I am.
I only get that because my first noise show was Merzbow and Masana when Merzbow used a laptop. So, so I
And
just
what
have
is
cred.
that?
That's all.
And explain why that's cred.
Why is that cred? Okay, well, Merzbow with a laptop versus Merzbow with a billion pedals and
Who is
like
Merzbow?
who was Merzbow? Messiah Akita, I think is how you say his name. Japanese fella that's been doing noise since the 80s. He is he's great. He's really funny online. Super like vegetarian guy, but he just makes what is considered like kind of the quintessential harsh noise wall sort of subgenre of noise. HNW, sometimes you'll see it abbreviated as, but it's just a lot of the time, and not all of Merzbow is like this, but a lot of it is just like, crashing waves of distortion that just feels almost more textural than, anything musical. Because I would definitely say like I would call a noise like music adjacent, not necessarily music. Merzbow using a laptop later in life, which is great, is just the way he chose and decided to start, making his sounds, which I think is completely fine. But back in the day, before he had access to a laptop, he had to use a lot of gadgets to get like what he wanted, and it was objectively cooler. He would stand with like a reverb unit strapped to him, like most people would wear a guitar, and in one hand he had like a pickup that was like strapped to his hand. And he'd scrape both things. Both things kind of are mic'd, so they're both like adding whatever sounds are generated from that are going into his table, and that table was just covered in pedals, like distortions and delays, and like there's like a mixer for some reason. He just got all these like little gadgets, and it just made this like crushing wall. And it was him with this giant table and his reverb machine. It was some lady I don't know. She kind of had like looks like a bunch of oscillators that just kind of went through a bass amp. Oh, and all this is being played through like Marshall amps and bass amps too. And then a guy that kind of stood at the front of the stage and sang, but like in a really weird way. And I remember he didn't wear shoes and he had a mullet. I thought it was very cool. But that was like my first experience with noise, was like seeing Masana and Merzbow.
What year?
Daniel Menchie. This would have been 96, I want to say. I was a brand new 21-year-old. And it was like Masana played for like 7.5 minutes, and then Merzbow played for like 2 hours, and both things just kind of were overwhelming and amazing. And I think for me, noise, like there's a little part of me that's always kind of recapture what that show felt like to me at 21 years old, seeing like this kind of thing for the first time. I mean, I'd heard a couple like noise releases at that point, but I didn't really pay much attention to it. I didn't fully get it. And then when I sat there in this wave of just craziness, it really started to make sense to me. And shortly after, I believe I saw Crash Worship, which was another like absolute spectacle of noise and depravity and fire and blood and wine and pain. It was awesome. It was so I like within a very short amount of time, I got introduced to just a couple pretty extreme experiences that kind of live in the sort of noise experimental world. And that's why the Merzbow laptop is not as cool. I mean, Crash Worship with just a laptop would be pretty lame.
That is
no
true.
drums, no fire, no homemade instruments.
So like I obviously, I know you're saying that it's music adjacent, but it seems to me that, like bands like Merzbow, like they've been in my world, at least that I'm familiar with them, right? Like he plays shows with hardcore bands or metal bands or whatever, right? So like, is this tangential then to hardcore and metal? Like, I mean, where did it originally splinter off? Where is its origins?
Like, where did noise come from?
Yeah, like did it develop from the same music scene that a lot of other things, or was it kind of its own thing and then they kind of followed a similar path?
I want to say like just sort of things like Crash Worship, which I've mentioned. Obviously, that comes from. I don't know if you know much about them, but they're focused more on like a kind of tribal drum circle sort of vibe. But like imagine that, but more like in hell with horrible waves of sound and crushing noise and doom happening along with it. So that's more of a tribal thing that got to be
That's more of a
Uh,
band.
it's they're more of a band, and but they still
I
do
would
what I would
say,
call noise. But
yeah, I mean, I would say Crash Worship is more of performance art. Not that a lot of noise isn't performance art,
well,
but I
this
can,
is it because a lot of noise is performance art, I think too.
yeah, totally. But I think that the noise that Eric is kind of mostly thinking about is more like the Merzbow kind of stuff. And
I
the
mean, if I
stuff that,
start,
you know,
but going back far enough, I'm going to start at like the basically the very beginning of any sort of electronic instruments at all, like in the fucking like theremins and stuff. Like that's kind of where
it's
noise started. Is the idea of
Neubauten
sort of
is really right when you say,
Neubauten.
yeah.
I mean, they're like a industrial kind of crash worshipy kind of thing as well, I suppose. In that same way, they're definitely more of banks. They actually have songs. I don't
Yeah,
think
but
Crash Worship has songs.
they would like show up and like play like the pipes and shit.
Yeah, they played Gasworks Park here. They played at
Yeah,
the park. Yeah, so.
right.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
there's certainly a level to performance art to that, and also there's a certain level of each. I think one thing that's kind of interesting about like noise and stuff like this is a lot of times like the performance itself is considered unique, like the room it was in, like who was there, what was around it, like just the setting. It's more of like each little thing is kind of individualized, but I mean, I'm getting off topic. I would just say like noise comes from, I believe, like the noise kind of started bubbling up around the very beginning of experimental music, when experimental music was sort of clashing with the invention of electronic music, and that's starting at things as early as the theremins, which I want to say was like late 1900 or early 1900s, not late, up until like the 50s when they started doing stuff with cassette tape loops. You had people like Raymond Scott, who would do these wild tape loop compilations of our songs that are just, super experimental and out there and weird, but also kind of like just cartoon music. There's just a lot of really weird stuff happening. But I think there became a moment in maybe the 80s where this is about, Throbbing Gristle, talking, and, after them, like Neubauten and stuff like that. There started to become this like kind of like darkness of like just tone and sound. I mean, you had people like what's the guy's name? Albert Niche, the painter, who would do. I'm gonna mess up his name. I should know, and I have something of his too. Who would do art pieces that had like kind of a loud kind of noise textural things. You had David Lynch's Eraserhead, which just sort of has this kind of like kind of a intrusive kind of textural background that's not really the sound of the wind or anything. It's not really the sound of the machinery, but it's kind of this little amalgam of all of that kind of just happening constantly over all the vocals. I mean, that's sort of like noise kind of springs off of stuff like that. Like it kind of comes from an art world and an experimental world. And I think noise artists like Merzbow, Masana, ones that just tried really, really intense, Hannah Tarash, who destroyed a club with a backhoe, people who tried to do
you should tell them about that really quick, because that's kind of
okay. Well, I'm not going to know all the details about that because it's just one of these things that's been passed down. But I've seen the video. But Hannah Tarash was a performers from Japan that I don't think played a lot of shows. I don't think we're asked to play a lot of shows. The one video that you can find pretty easy on the internet of them is him like jumping around on like barrels and screaming, like with people watching him. He's just like throwing metal bins against the wall and like screaming and like jumping into the bins or the barrels. Sorry, these big metal barrels. But at one point, he had apparently booked a club in Tokyo and showed up at behind the club with a backhoe, like a big backhoe, and just destroyed the club, like smashed out the back wall. I think the club was going to get torn down, I believe. But I don't think he was like allowed to or asked to do this like insanely dangerous thing of like destroying a building with people inside of it, which is kind of the way it's been explained to me in the way that I've chosen to believe. Although I think the details are probably a little different. But it was kind of a legendary moment. Like there's a lot of extreme things in I'm gonna go grab the book real quick. But there's a lot of people who have done the book you got me.
The book that I got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more like power electronic stuff, but it's anyway.
I don't know. I mean, this is like, I think that what it comes down to is a lot of the things that just sort of appeal to Damian and I, because we didn't really do any noise pre Hemingway. We did a little bit. We had some noise tracks, right?
Hmm.
We didn't really do
Yeah.
much noise, I don't think.
I mean, like I think when I was talking with Damien, like that accessory EP, like that was noise, right?
Nah, that was just
It has moments, a
that
lot
was
of
just dumb.
like
That was
kind of
just
a
dumb
noise
bullshit.
accompaniment, but and that yeah, that record's terrible. But
That's just like way too long garbage.
but we
But
did. I mean, we did some noise on Caesarean. There was like some feedback stuff we played with. We would put like noise underneath like fast parts just as like a textural gravel, and then I think in the rest of we did that a little bit in the other playing enemy stuff, but Andrew wasn't really as into fun as we were, so we kind of didn't have a lot of time to do those sort of things. But we would we do a little bit. But I think after playing enemy broke up, we really kind of just dove into it.
and I think what sort of appealed to us, I mean, one of the things that obviously we liked about it was that writing with playing enemy was so exhausting, and we spent so much time on details and iterating and just breaking our backs for a song that we weren't even that happy with when it was over. And Noise was this chance to do something that required, none of that forethought and none of that sort of slaving over the details, but in the right scenario, still was able to deliver for us like that same kind of feeling of like a live performance, or um the early noise stuff we did was just, I don't know, just, I mean, it was also really like banana stuff. Like the first tape Damien and I did was just, how long was that? 15 minutes maybe.
Hmm.
And I mean, it is unlistenable. I mean, it is so just going and going and going. Um,
Depressing foreign movies.
Depressing porn movies, yeah. Um, and like, I don't know. I mean, maybe I think a lot of it was just sort of like trying to like get away from the constraints that we had been stuck in and which sort of depressed us. Or it's sort of like, when you separate from someone, you kind of make the determination as to what you didn't like about that, and then you kind of try to figure out what you can do to counteract.
Yeah, I think there's a freedom in making noise. You're just kind of doing a thing, and if and if you enjoy that, that sounds good and it feels good. And when we came out of a band that was really like, very kind of, we self-imposed a lot of strictness on us that I think kind of sucked some of the joy out of things. I think we just wanted to kind of escape from that. Like,
Yeah. And also I think there was also this thing about which is, more of a personal thing for me, which is that our, and we probably talked about this, Eric, when the last podcast, but I and Andrew were like very much at loggerheads all the time about my performance live. And, he thought I was, doing too much or just being too stupid. No, he wasn't necessarily wrong. But it was this kind of thing where Andrew was just so focused on me playing correctly, which I sort of, ended up doing to sate him. But then when we got to do noise shows, I just got to not worry about this thing that always hung over my head, like during a show, So then I could just be dumb, and it didn't matter because it's just a noise show. And we also were playing, I mean, playing enemy was a fairly I mean, technical seems like an overstatement, but it was a band, it's not, we weren't in a punk band. And um and we would, when we would play shows and stuff, there would be this sort of like, watching other bands and seeing how well they played their instruments, et cetera, et cetera. And we start going to noise shows, and I mean, these are like talentless people. And I don't mean that in like um, they're creative and they're artistic, but their talent lies not in any sort of instrument or understanding of stuff. I mean, this was fairly early on with um, Hemingway. Damien and I played a show. It's when we first met. What's his name? Demian, is he an anarchist or a
Oh,
communist?
Slates.
Yeah. What's his name? Not Nathan.
It'll come to me in a second. But
Anyway,
yes,
we saw him at this house and fairly early on, and he had like a crate like combo head. It's like,
like a little 8-inch practice amp. Like,
yeah, it's the kind of thing you get at a pawn shop for like $20. And he had that, and then he had like a broken like old tape recorder and or a cassette tape, like a
like an old Walkman.
old Walkman, thank you. And for about like 7 minutes, he was just playing this like broken Walkman into this crate amp, and it wasn't very loud. And he just stood there and he just kind of did this thing, and I also kind of stood around and watched him do it. And
Josh.
Josh, thank you, Josh. And when it was over, I was like, "This is great. This is awesome." And I'm like, there was nothing about it that was musical or required. I mean, I don't have a recording of it, so I don't know even how good it was really. But there was just something like so, I guess, pure about it, and something
Mm.
where like completely disconnected from so much of, I think, also like the scene bullshit and just stuff you kind of grow up in. Like, I mean, Damien and I have many stories of playing shows where people would, walk out on us or walk out before we even started playing because, we didn't look like a hardcore band, or, we weren't playing the kind of music that they had come for because they were there for, whatever. And noise shows are so much more communal. Like no one leaves
Yeah.
during a set. Um, no one is sort of like kind of sizing others up, or there's not this sort of idea that, at some point you're kind of looking to play bigger venues or do anything. There's just something so punk rock about it, I guess.
Yeah, this very loose structure. Like there's no one being like, hey, get up on stage. You got to start at 9. It's like it just kind of starts when it starts, and then like the one thing about noise shows is it takes like each set's about 15 minutes long, sometime on average, but the time between sets is like an hour and a half sometimes
That is
because
true.
it is so communal. You're just kind of just hanging out. Like it's not. It's for something that I think a lot of people think is incredibly pretentious. The idea of just like making noise and not like, you know, playing your instrument like a normal person. Like, it's so unpretentious. It's just like, I mean, those people, like, they weren't like fooling anyone. Like, they weren't like, oh, wait till everyone sees me at the noise show. It's like, what? No, this is like 12 more losers like me. Like, who cares? Like, there was just, but like, going there and seeing this stuff and being like, wow, like this really is like a lot of these people, like this is their favorite thing. Like this is all they listen to. Like
Yeah.
they only own cassette tapes and they only listen to like the sound of what some people have often described to me as a vacuum cleaner just left on. Like I've had 5 people say that don't know each other, and I'm just like, yeah, okay, yeah, I guess I hear it, but
Yeah, I mean, I think that like, a close-ish analog to a lot of the aesthetics of the noise scene is like the uh uh bestial black metal stuff, which is like usually recorded on like a boombox, sounds like absolute dog shit. It's released on cassette tapes. There's, no desire to sound good. It just, pushes back against sort of like mainstream acceptance. But the thing about bestial black metal that is different than noise is like there's still this aesthetic. Like you still got to call your shit like, pit of anal despair, goat anal despair, whatever. And in noise, it's just like, hi, like I'm Sandy, like this song is called like Polka Dot, and then it's just like harsh noise or something. And that doesn't, and that there's no barrier to playing noise, I think, is the number one thing. I mean, and again, this is probably something that came up on the last podcast, but Damien and I, when we first played our first Hemingway show, we showed up with amps, we showed up with our gear, and the thing is that I had an iPod with pre-recorded noise, and that was going through other pedals. And the idea was I was going to play the iPod and manipulate the noise, and then Damien was just going to scream. This is all going to come through these like my bass amp and at least one cab. I can't remember.
I think we brought both half stacks.
I think we did. Yeah, we brought both half stacks, and we
like
show
a
up.
Marshall and a Mesa half stack.
Yeah, we show up, and it's a festival. There's like 12 other bands or something, and we're the only band that brings amps. Everyone else plays through the PA, and no one else. Like Damien's like aggressive screaming. No one else had. Did anyone else even have vocals, Damien?
I don't think so. Maybe Gnome. Gnome might have had a little singing.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. And like people were super into it, and people weren't super into it necessarily because what we did was, I mean, they liked that it was something different, but they were just accepting. Like they were happy to have anyone do this.
Yeah, I think it was pretty clear that we like didn't really know what we were doing, but I think that was like, it's almost like that's a prerequisite to enjoy yourself in these positions, is to not have any idea what you're doing and just go for it. You had asked about the divergence between metal and noise. I mean, one thing Shane and I really noticed by like going, we played hundreds of shows, I feel like, in those like first few years after Playing Enemy was over, but there's like definitely two different ways that people come to noise a lot of times, and it is often through hardcore or punk or whatever. Like you get into extreme stuff, like some of the black metal stuff is just noise. Like it just, you kind of find yourself coming from that direction. But there's a whole other side of it that comes really strongly from this sort of like Frank Zappa kind of world of, Sun Ra, Frank Zappa, fucking who's our Troutfish replica guy, Trout Master replica. Why can't I remember his name right now? Also played with Frank Zappa for a while, but it's so important. God damn it!
Trout Master replica. You already said that. Oh, Captain Beef.
There you go, Captain Beefheart. There you go. Whew. I got to lay off these 4 vapes I have here. Yeah, but there's a whole other side of noise that comes from more that world, and a lot of times, like, we would be playing a show, and I could tell, like, oh, these are like kind of like Zappa art nerd noise kids. It's gonna be like kind of funkier noise, like it'll just like more like Moog organ kind of noise. And that maybe not at least people would have that kind of sound, but if you imagine like the stuff in between Sun Ra songs on those last few records, there's like some straight up like harsh noise like on those things, and it's kind of like that, as opposed to like just like the kind of blistering, dark, screamy noise that you get from more the hardcore metal side of it. So it was interesting to see. Sometimes you'd actually start catching genres of what is essentially like improvise, some sound performances. Like, I don't know.
Also, a thing I really love about noise shows or noise performances is that there's no songs. It's just like a performance. So you know how you're watching a band and you're just like, oh, cool. What a great way to end the set. And then they're like, we have 4 more songs. And you're just like, son of a bitch. Yeah. The nice thing about noise sets is that when they stop playing, that shit's over.
Yeah, it's done. That was it.
So then you don't have to be like, oh, is there gonna be one more?
Yeah, I always love that. There's and even still even in that world of like 15-minute sets, we would see sets and we are like, oh, they should have ended right there. Like that was perfect.
Totally.
They went a little too long. Like that happened all the time. Or times like, oh, that was not long enough. They should have played another 10 minutes. There's no way they did not establish that. And again, it's not like songwriting. It's not parts. And I'm sure. I mean, there is a level of like, kind of what you're doing when you go up to perform.
Damian and I definitely have had good noise shows and bad noise shows, and some of those good or some of those bad noise shows have stemmed from us not ending at the right time. Because we kind of found a thing and then we got a little greedy or whatever. We thought we could ride that longer, or we thought we kind of knew what we were manipulating, and then we kind of like take a left turn and we're like, shit, okay. And then we're kind of now we got like at least another couple minutes we got to do to like try to get our way out of that. And who knows? Like, and again, like I'm not even really sure this is quantifiable. For anyone, who's just listening to it. But
So if you've got a noise show coming up, right? Like, do you prepare or is that all like
I do.
improvised? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I just played a couple weeks ago. I opened for Planning for Burial. I did like a guitar noise set, and this is a little not.
How much practice? How much practice did you do, Damian?
I think like 30 minutes of practice.
I
was gonna say it's not.
And when did you do it?
Right before the show. No, but it's also a little like that Picasso thing, like, oh, it took me all this time, because there is like, I have like sort of a vocabulary of approaches, I guess, when it comes to what I do on guitar when I'm playing more of a noise show. And again, this is guitar. There's some forced structure in there because the one thing about Shane and I doing noise, like we almost immediately could not help but start making them like songs. Like we tried our hardest not to like make this like songs, but we just couldn't help it. And that's kind of why Great Falls became a band. It's just the noise became more and more structured and more song-like. And, for a long time we didn't have drums, but we started using like rhythmic loops to be drums. We're like, well, technically it's noise, but you're like, well, so I mean, technically drums are noise too. Like it's just some racket, some idiots hitting, So
yeah.
We just started becoming like a normal band, so that happens.
Yeah. Also, I think we were getting a little. I personally was getting a little bored of the live shows.
Yeah.
It was just getting a little. It was starting to feel a little, like we're doing the same thing over and over. We would try different stuff, and then, yeah, it was just getting a little too, like we're just kind of doing. We're just here. We are. I don't know. I mean, again, like the thing about one thing about noise. A big difference between noise and playing a regular show is without, putting aside like really horrible technical difficulties, if you have a bad show playing music, it's a bad show. It's a huge bummer, like, kind of sits with you for a while. Like no matter what anyone says, you kind of don't want to hear it, whatever. If you play a bad noise show in front of people who are just like, what is this? You feel like a fucking jackass. Like you feel like, the kind of guy who, like goes into a Taco Bell for like a viral video and like just starts like screaming nonsense or something. And you're just like, what is this idiot doing? And I think we were racking up enough of those shows that I think we both felt like we could get back to something that's a little more reliable than just sort of like, because we would practice and we would always have this thing in mind, but it would never go exactly how we planned.
Yeah, we'd like, oh, this is perfect. We kind of start here and then we end up around here, like
never happened. Pretty much never happened a single time. So
usually went off the rails almost immediately. Yeah, and I think we also just missed like sitting down and working on parts and all that stuff. I mean, like I said, the songs became more and more song-like with actual riffs, and I think then finally we're like, oh fuck it, let's just do a band again. But I don't think that's definitely not the trajectory for a lot of people who, you know, sorry, a lot of people that work in noise. A lot of them, like my buddy Stan, Dried Up Corpse, Blue Sabbath Black Cheer guy, like I don't see him ever doing anything else but this. And what he does is great, sounds awesome. But it's it's there. He's just not. This is what he does. Like this noise stuff. This is to him. This is music. It's one thing guy from Merzbow says. Like to you guys, to a lot of people, they say what I do is just like a bunch of noise and racket. But to me, that's what all pop songs sound like. And it's funny, whatever. But it's but I get it. Like there are to some people where this really is like this is what it needs to sound like.
Yeah, and also Stan was Dried Up Corpse was one of the shows where we um, played with them, and one of their things was just putting a mic in a cement mixer,
Mhm.
which the cement mixer gave off a lot of dust.
Yeah,
Like I
dust we
went through
probably
that.
should not have been breathing.
Yeah, probably not. That was still when you could smoke inside, though.
Yeah,
So some cement particulates probably weren't
that's
that
true. There's
compared to.
also, I will say to people who go to noise shows, there's a lawlessness to noise shows that can be a lot of fun if you're down for like a little bit of chaos. Like it can be pretty cool to like go someplace where someone's like there's like some fucking kid selling you beer in the back of this house where every single person is smoking cigarettes or weed indoors, and you're just like, this is not a normal venue. Like it's just it's a fun
Yeah.
sort of thing like that.
I mean, I think that really like yeah, I mean a lot of it does sort of come down to again the punk rock nature of things like when you see and this is certainly something Damien and I have talked about a lot of times, but like you'll see these photos of like Bad Brains in like 1980 or um Dead Kennedys in like 82, and it looks like complete fucking chaos and like danger. And you're just like, man, what could they be playing? Like this has to be the most fucked up like insanity you could ever. And then it's just like Holiday in Cambodia, and you're just like, oh no, that's not what I wanted to hear. Like, and I'll see punk rock shows nowadays, and they look cool and kids are having fun, but they're just playing like shit that doesn't really isn't like heavy or anything. It's just sort of like cool punk rock or hardcore or whatever. And this is still one of the few things where people can be serious about it and be doing it just for the love of it, but also even a big chunk of people who like somewhat extreme music would be like, no, this is not like I can't hang with this. Like this is
Yeah,
a little too much. And I always like that. I mean,
there were
it's
some
hard.
shows that were kind of scary. Like I toured with this guy Horrid on the East Coast, just doing noise for like a weekend or maybe a few shows, and he would just cut the shit out of himself every time he played. He'd just do harsh noise, and he just cut huge gashes in his arms and face and chest. Went to hospital like 3 times in 3 days with that guy. Like he was a professional chef, had like the nicest apartment I've ever seen in Philadelphia. Like clearly made a lot of money, and then also just cut himself to pieces, just fucking ribbons. And it was gnarly. And I rode in the van with him, and he was just bleeding everywhere. That kind of stuff is scary to be around sometimes because I mean, I don't want to make too many things. I mean, the guy was super nice, but that guy's clearly crazy, right? like
Yeah,
that's so
what's
hardcore.
Justice?
Justice Yeldum.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Australian guy who plays
Hmm.
glass. He like puts contact mics on pieces of glass, and occasionally he'll just like cut himself with the glass as well while he's doing it. And we saw him, and it was not good.
He was, he
But
was having like technical problems immediately. It was
it
just,
was, yeah.
yeah. Once like your pedals stop working immediately, it kills the mood in a way that's really a huge bummer.
There is, and I guess that's the other thing is sort of there just kind of has to be certain, depending, I guess, like, there sort of has to be a certain attitude when you're doing it because if again, it's sort of like if you don't have that attitude, there's almost, a little bit of like a suspension of disbelief at times when you're watching this stuff to be like, okay, that is what they're doing. Like they are, like like I mean, when I remember playing a show and I was just like taking the mic and I was just like running it on the floor like over and over, and like that it was cool. I thought it worked out well, but in other contexts it would be like, why is this grown man spending his time doing this? Like, I know people came to see him, I know people are cheering for him, but like, what is the point of this? Um, so I do, so there still is that a bit of fine line, I think, just based on what our expectations are for someone getting up on stage and doing something. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's been more accepted in like sort of extreme metal nowadays to do it. Or there have been more extreme metal people who have like taken like serious metal or serious noise projects and kind of put them out there so that people, I mean, Blood Incantation, that's a noise record, right? Didn't they put out a noise record, Damien?
It's like a synth record,
Oh, it's a synth
but yeah,
record.
yeah. But it's
I mean, like
it.
one of the earlier examples of that I can think of anyway was like, didn't Dwid from Integrity do that Psy Warfare? Like, wasn't that supposed to be a
Mhm.
noise album, like,
Yeah,
or noise
that was
project?
nice.
And then
Yeah,
like in the early 2000s, wasn't Relapse like signing no or at least releasing noise
release. Yeah.
artists? Yeah. Because I remember like I had this like I sampler or whatever. I'm listening to it. I was like, oh yeah, this is cool. And then it was like noise, and I'm like, ooh, like that. The we changed pretty significantly. So like in my opinion, that's why I always kind of thought of it as like a spin-off of the scene. But like
Mhm.
Damien saying, like there's also the weird Captain Beefheart followers. Like do those intersect at these noise shows, or is there kind of a
I think I
two
think even more
camps?
so nowadays. That's. I mean, I don't know how strong that divide was. I think it's just something we sort of noticed by what people seem to be sort of into and what they were communicating. But I feel like even that whatever was there feels like it's gotten a little fuzzier over time.
I mean, Glenn Branca and like Naked City kind of stuff, like that didn't start with any sort of metal component, but then he started inviting whoever, uh, um, and so it brought in more metal elements. But I mean, so much of like Glenn Branca stuff is, essentially just noise being an outcropping of like freeform jazz.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, that's something we definitely I definitely didn't mention early on. I wish had I known I was supposed to come up with the history of noise, I would have prepared a little more. But I had there's like people like Peter Brotzman, saxophone player from I think '60s. He just would just do like these long fucking crazy saxophone. It's like, kind of like Bill Pullman's character in Lost Highway, like the crazy sax solo that goes on. It becomes just basically like just no noise-ish by the end. Like that was essentially his entire career. It's awesome. But yeah, so there became a lot of that stuff came from jazz. In fact, a lot of the experimental stuff that happens nowadays that's still sort of acoustic when it comes to noise, I feel like kind of still comes from more of a more jazz place. People who like play the violin strange, or the cello. There's a Japanese documentary on noise, and one of the people just like goes crazy on a cello, like scraping the metal and like banging it and like playing with weird things. But yeah, so there's that there is another side to like that kind of world as well. And I think all the little subgenres of noise do kind of borrow from each other pretty often. So say there's a little spillover.
Is
yeah,
there?
I mean, oh, go on.
I was just say, is there a difference between noise and drone? Like, are they related? Are they like step siblings?
I would say they're related. I mean, um, I mean, they're both sort of, I mean, depending on who's doing it. I mean, they're both sort of, anti-music or like a
Hmm.
structureless attempt to, um, create something. I mean, I think that a lot of it for me is just sort of like, um, sound is sound. Like, when I talked to Lustmord, who was a contemporary, he's still doing stuff, but he was a contemporary of Throbbing Gristle and stuff. And the stuff he made initially was just mostly like found sounds, like a manipulation of found sounds. And for him, his sort of stance was, this is what I wanted to hear. And and I didn't know anyone else like kind of producing it. But but at that point, it's not really even, an idea. It's not even really a conversation about music and more just an idea of like sound. I mean, I don't think we uh uh you know uh we tend to like, we'll talk about like ASMR and like, all of these sort of things about but we don't consider ASMR to be music or anything. Um and I feel like noise is sort of being like, but why don't we? Like, how about we just kind of shift that line a little bit? Or and also I think there's sort of this sort of dual conversation, almost like sort of a paradoxical way we kind of think about it, which is that we think of noise music as being like this extreme music sort of thing that does all these things and consists of all these structure, or like attempts to deconstruct music or do whatever, highlight certain ways that music moves us. But then also I think we like noise also because of the ability for it to be like, this isn't music, like this isn't, we don't, like, this is not to be judged in the same way that, like, just enjoy sound. I mean, I interviewed a found sound guy um years ago who like went into like the belly of this abandoned nuclear plant that we have in Washington. And he just like went into these like flooded tunnels with rubbers on and just held out a mic and just recorded him like walking through these tunnels. And I loved listening to it. And also, as you may not know, like I have and continue to work in radio. So like I like ambient noise and those kinds of things. Like these are things that I spend some time thinking about myself. But, this found sound guy who's just like, oh, I'm walking through these, flooded tunnels. Um, he isn't saying he's making music because he's just sort of recording something, but listening to it is wonderful. Like it's fantastic. And without sort of noise music, I think legitimizing a musicless composition, I think that people would have a harder time legitimizing things like that. And to actually sort of say to themselves, like, yes, this is what I want to listen to. No, it's not four chords. It's not, there's no melody here, but there's something about it that I can find, artistic or at least fulfilling in a way that, maybe wouldn't be there without these other people saying that you don't need that to make something.
Is noise typically without vocals or
I mean, if you add up all of the releases in the world that are considered noise, then I'd say yes. Like, but not necessarily. There's nothing like really. Whatever it's there's people who probably just do vocals. I mean, we know there is Pharmacon. That's
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it's entirely vocals, but I think it started off that way. There's a few other people that do stuff that's very like vocally based, and that can just be part of it too. I think it's more about like kind of breaking away from any traditional song structures, sort of traditionally kind of culturally accepted instrumentations. I mean, when you think of a band, you think of guitar, bass, drums, and then stuff, and we know there's, exceptions to that. Of course there is. I mean, tons of it, but like in general, the average band is this type of thing, and noise is very much not that. But a noise band could be guitar, bass, and drums, like that could, and they could use zero effects. They could just make a racket, and that would be either annoying or awesome to listen to. I don't know without having to hear it. So,
Do you feel that noise is less emotionally approachable then because of its non-traditional structure? Like, do you have that emotional outpouring at a noise show that you would at whatever other random show you would have?
I'd say the sounds that come from a traditional noise show are things that, like, I think when encountered in, like, outside of a venue would startle you and make you want to, like, move away from them. I don't think they're, like, as pleasant as most music that's written to be enjoyed in that way. I think there is something sort of slightly disturbing and maybe a little challenging that I think some people enjoy, some people might not. If you think about there's definitely been noise shows we've been there that have been either too loud or too weird, or the people are too creepy, or there's way too much blood stuff happening, where you're frightened, you're not enjoying this time very much anymore. You're like, I should maybe get away from this, or this is just unpleasant for me, and that can happen too. But I think it's just different, and there's also like a mystery to it. If you're a musician or someone who likes making noise or sounds or whatever, when you hear noise, there's almost that little part of your brain that's kind of trying to, like, decipher it. Like, oh, what's happening here? What's being used? What am I hearing? What kind of room is this in? What size am I hearing? Like, am I hearing the sounds bounce? Like, what's happening here? Like, there's just a little bit of I don't know. There's kind of a little treat inside. If you're willing to, like, sit there and dissect it, you might actually kind of forensically go over the sounds. You can kind of discover some stuff that's really interesting, and sometimes actually kind of pleasant.
Is noise best experienced like live, or do you listen to those recordings on your own at home or whatever? Or is it more like that communal experience? I mean, if you went to a noise show, right, and you liked whatever it was,
Uh-huh.
do you then buy merch and listen to it on your drive home, or like
Demian,
Sometimes.
Demian more than me. Damien's listened to way more noise than I have.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, kind of. I mean, to me, it's like I said early on, like, everything I've been doing since has been to recapture that first Merzbow show. It's like once you start drinking, like, you always want to, reclaim that first time you got drunk. It was awesome. There's a little bit of that. Or, like, if so when I go to a noise show now, if I really like what they're doing, and I'll pick something up, and I do actually hope it kind of sounds like what I heard them do, like, of that, like, I hope they have that, what they do kind of translates, because I want to capture a little bit of that memory. I think I almost look at noise, like the merch you get from a noise show, almost more like a souvenir than I might of, like, a more traditional band. Like, if I was going to go buy, like, if we, for some reason we went and saw Converge and I wanted to buy a Converge record, like, that's kind of like adding it to your library, or like to rock out later or something like that. But, like, if I go see a really great Slate show and he's selling a fucking microfiche or something, I might grab that, and just to kind of, like, remember that memory. Like, it's a little snapshot. It's like getting the little flattened penny that's got the giraffe on it, but instead it's got pictures of, like, dead prostitutes on it, and it's been dipped in motor oil, and you're like, cool, thanks.
I
Another
mean,
thing we talk about with noise is thankfully it seems like it's going away, but there was a good couple 20 years there of, like, some pretty intense, like, fetishization of abuse that also is definitely in and around the noise scene. That's not,
Yeah, I
not
mean,
super cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're sort of skipping over some of the more controversial aspects of some of the foundational noise.
Yeah, I mean, Death Squad. That was the book you got me.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I believe he's the one who like held people at gunpoint during
yeah,
shows.
yeah. That's right. Yeah,
Yeah, with a loaded weapon.
he was putting a loaded gun up to people's heads.
Like you got to, you part of the set was watching him load the gun, and then he'd like walk up and point to your head. He's crazy, so like, you know, if someone's like, "Oh, don't kill that person and become a legend," and then live in a jail where you're gonna definitely be the scariest person.
Seriously.
Yeah, don't do that. So there's a little part of you being like, "Wow, this guy's nothing to lose," because you know what? He's never bought a tuner before. He doesn't care about anything.
I mean, I think that both Damien and I definitely know people who have some pretty bad taste in art, but still like noise. But I don't know. I think it would be very hard for Damien and I to find that line between where, like sort of where our appreciation of noise stops and our um appreciation of like the performance art of it begins, because without sort of like Merzbow, for example, like he's not performance art at all, and a lot of people aren't. I mean, a guy like James Plotkin, when he was doing Phantom Smasher, he would just sit at a laptop too, but there was like a little bit of like performance art to that, to sort of be
Yeah,
like a
like Dave Whitty played Jenga or something with him once.
Dave Whitty and his wife played Jenga in front of him, yeah, while it was going on. But I think that I don't know if I didn't like art or performance art or anything. If I thought all of that was bullshit, I don't know how much I would necessarily like a lot of the noise stuff that I've appreciated or that we've done, um, because that is a really fundamental part of so much of it. It's like or of a lot of it. It's like if I thought that everything that was surrounded noise was like pretentious, but I just liked to listen to it, I don't know if that person exists. Um, so I think there has to maybe be a little bit of like just enjoyment of people, risking looking like pretentious jackasses to create it. Uh, and without that, I don't know. Like people who just love like, rock and roll, I think any of this stuff is the same as like people who love cool paintings and then go see like a Rothko, you know, and are just like, who gives a shit? My kid could do that, you know. Um,
Yeah, like
like,
there's a lot of people who use the visual, analogies when it comes to noise, like, Pollux versus Rembrandt's kind of thing.
yeah, it's hard for me to imagine the person who doesn't appreciate a Rothko but appreciates a noise performance. Uh, because I do feel that they are sort of like they do kind of have to exist on the same plane of um sort of eschewing talent and practice for a more, like you're saying, like sort of like visceral. I mean, definitely Pollock. Pollock was a visceral painter. He was action was a big part of what he was doing with the drip paintings, and I think it's pretty impossible for someone to not either appreciate both of those things or think both of those things are stupid. Um, Maybe, or at least without not, knowing the process. I mean, Damien and I were talking to, or maybe I just talked to him. I can't remember. A guy from Wood from Man is the Bastard, and who also does Bastard Noise, and Bastard Noise is noise. And what did he say, Damien? About the
Which
mixing?
thing?
About the
Oh, that
mixing?
it took him like 2 years or something, or
No, he said
no?
like he said something like we've been like he was doing maybe a split with Brutal Truth or something, and Bastard Noise had this piece, and I don't know, let's say it was like 18, 25 minutes, who gives a shit? It could be an hour. And he said something like, we've been mixing for like 8 hours a day for the last 6 weeks or something. It was just some insane thing, some absolutely insane thing.
Yeah.
And to that, I don't know how
Yeah,
I
that's
support that.
that's someone who has such a love of the process that they like to really live in that process.
Something.
I mean, because yeah, if you're doing like hundreds of tracks of noise, or even just a dozen tracks of noise, like I can see why like the mixing would make things sound greatly different. But like, man, you got to give yourself a break a little bit in there.
Yeah, at some point, it's diminishing returns.
Yeah, was it juice ain't worth the squeeze?
That juice is not worth the squeeze, no, far from it. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's again, it would be if someone were to ask me to defend, any sort of performance art or any sort of like modern art stuff that seemingly doesn't take any talent or execution. I would likely use many of the same arguments to defend noise. That there is just something, there's a visceral, just deeply, again, I think that there is a fine line between, there's a fine line between sort of being dramatic and pretentious and then having like a legitimate sort of visceral reaction to what is being done. And I think, Damian and I have seen both, and I feel like I've done both, like, and the dramatic, pretentious, whatever is the stuff that I think, the haters see with everyone, and those who appreciate it see the other side of just that there really can't be something that comes out of structure and traditional music that can elicit the same sort of feelings that this does. I mean, I was listening to a guy today. His name's Chick White. He just does like improv guitar and improv voice and improv mouth harp, and he is a crazy person. I mean, it is true like outsider art stuff. And Damien and I love outsider art stuff. Like
big fan.
And outsider art is, in some ways, I mean, outsider art isn't noise, and noise isn't outsider art, but I love both because I do feel there's just like a purity, or there can be a purity to that kind of stuff. Yeah, I don't know.
So like composition wise, right? Like normal music, right? Damien will bring in like when you guys are doing normal Great Falls stuff. Damien will bring in guitar. You'll, imagine what bass would sound good with that, right? Like if you guys are collectively, hopefully, if you guys are
You're putting the imagining bass parts way ahead in the
Yeah,
process.
that's about 6 months early, but sure.
you guys are collectively coming up with noise, right? Like does Damien have whatever that sound, whatever that effect is in your mind? Do you independently have one, and then do you not care what they sound like together? Or is it more of a collaborative where I think this would sound good layered with that?
So you're talking about when we're actually like putting together, if we were to be like just doing Hemingway again and just doing straight up noise, like how would this come together?
Yeah.
Okay, I think this might actually, maybe this, Shane, you can tell me if this makes sense, but we sort of take a role, like there's two of us, right? So there's two of us there to produce sound in some way, and we would switch up stuff a lot. There was a tour, I think, where Shane played guitar and I played guitar. I mean, we would just do like weird things sometimes.
I didn't play bass for like 2 years.
Yeah, and then when it came up, it was like, I guess we're a band now. Damn it. But when like each person sort of like, you kind of like adopt a voice. Like, this is the voice I'm going to be making. This is the sound I will be producing. And it doesn't necessarily have to stay that one sound, but like if I knew I was going to be making noise through guitar, I think Shane and I both kind of understand what the general like sound, voice, accent, or whatever of what Demian will be doing right now is going to produce, like where that's going to be. And if Shane's playing keyboards or guitar or bass or whatever, like I kind of know where he's going to sort of live in this sort of like thing we're going to put together. So it's almost like just going in with someone, like knowing, doing a duet, knowing what both your voices sound like, and knowing like kind of where the strengths are, like what what like what am I trying to say, like what I sound like, what you sound like, what we sound like together. So we kind of know that, and some of the process of whether it's noise or not, like some of the process is just sort of like hearing sound, hearing what the sound's like. All right, cool, got it. I mean, what your instrument sounds like definitely, if whether you're playing traditional music or not, definitely kind of informs how you're going to play it. If you think about, the guys in Sun aren't going to be playing like a bunch of high, fast stuff with the way their guitars sound, and like Dylan, Dillinger's Escape Plan's not going to like just strum a chord for like a half hour, because it's just the way there's their instrument, the way there's the voices of those instruments sound, just, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't lend itself to. I mean, possibly, maybe in the way of me thinking now, like, oh, well, actually, there's maybe a cool idea in there. We could do I'm already thinking of things, but you just each person kind of has their own little like. It's not like you have your job, but you just have something you're going to do. And when the other person's there and you've played together for a long time, like Shane and I have, you kind of understand like how to play off each other a little bit with whatever we know we're going to be using to make sound at that time. So it's definitely less focused than when writing a song. Like when we're actually doing Great Falls, it's like actual riffs, and we kind of build a song together, and then we start adding the pieces. But when it comes to more noise, it's definitely more vibes based. And if I'm giving Shane like noise parts for him to use, he'll find appropriate parts, because in Great Falls it's a little different. Like Shane kind of handles like 90% of all like noise and like extra textural elements. I mean, sometimes I'll be like, oh, it'd sound cool here, it's like this, but usually he's kind of on it. Like he's got, I don't know where he gets all the stuff from, but he's got sounds and he makes cool shit happen. And then we also have John Shork we use, who makes some cool shit too. But it's kind of Shane's job to sort of put together a lot of the external kind of textural parts of Great Falls. So I sort of lend it to his judgment, because with noise, like when we watch people, when there's someone who's good or bad, a lot of times what you're actually seeing is you're just seeing their taste level. This is what this person thinks sounds good, and you're like, wow, and they're right, that does sound good. And there's other people who don't really, maybe they don't know how to use their equipment they're using, or the vibe's just off, or something's wrong, where you're just like, yeah, this isn't working, like this is not, cut it. Like, so I just trust Shane in his ability to do those things. So he takes care of a lot of that. But there will be like times where we just make source noise for Shane to have for like an hour or much longer if given the time.
Yeah.
But like in a pure noise situation, right? Is the intention then to make those two sounds more complementary or more dissonant? Like, or does it depend on what you're trying to do?
I'd say depends for sure.
Okay.
Like I'd say if we're doing something that was more drony, and the concept is like to kind of take a note or a sound or a tone and push it as long and far as you can, we'd probably try to come together as much as possible and sort of resonate off each other a bit. But if we're doing something more noisy, it can often be really nice if like one of you takes the high and one of you takes the low, and that way you can sort of like exist in your world knowing that the other person kind of has theirs sort of taken care of, and you can kind of play off each other that way. I'm making it sound like successful noise is like hyper segregated and everyone knows like what they're doing, and I don't know if that works for everyone, but I just feel like kind of knowing what you're bringing to the table, and whether it's just you doing it or you and a partner or whatever, like just knowing what you're going to do and kind of knowing what the other people around you are going to do, like really helps kind of inform like how you want either this performance or this recording or whatever to go. So I don't know if that's an answer, but
It's a good answer. I mean, I guess this might be a trick question, right? But if we're kind of defining noise as anti-music or counter music or the deconstruction of music, something that Great Falls does exceptionally well is kind of combines noise and texture with whatever music, right? So like, does that kind of redefine it? if you're including anti-music to make better music? Like, how does that how does that reconciliation happen?
Well, bands that use like noise and weird stuff have been doing it for a really long time. So like, I mean, the Beatles, did that kind
Of
of shit.
course,
Like,
yeah.
so Nick Drake has that Riverman song, which is so great. I kind of reintroduced that the other day, hearing it again with new ears. And there's just a part where there's just like a recording of kids talking for like a second, like just little weird moments like that. Those sort of textural moments. People have been doing that for a long time. If anything, I think Shane's just sort of, I mean, from my perspective, he's kind of just leaning into that more, almost like a having like a fully artist in the band kind of thing, but someone who's able to just sort of like hear the music and understand like where some interesting sounds might work great, or like how do we take this part and accentuate it in a way that is not just turning up the volume. Like, what can we do to like make this part shine in a way? Sometimes it is to take away everything extra and just have this be the most stripped down part of the song ever. Just guitar over here, bass over here, drum center. That's cool, and then everything's chaotic after that. Or sometimes it is to like amp up that part with some texture or tone or like some sort of little drone note or something that's going to just make everything else underneath it. It's kind of chefy in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good way to put it. Like, I don't really look at noise in regular songs as anything except our refusal to add another member, but needing our refusal to add another member and our refusal to have Demian do a lot of guitar overdubs that are like another piece of the
Hmm.
song. Pretty much like I think that we have sort of more or less come to terms with the idea that if we are filling sonic, because usually it's like, if you're thinking about the waveform, I'm sort of visualizing where in the waveform we could maybe have something to,
Hmm.
move it along, where it just feels like it's missing something. And I think that we've sort of compromised in the belief that like we could either fill those holes with another instrument, which would require like someone else or Damien writing a bunch of different parts or whatever, or we can fill it with noise. And since the noise itself is more textural and more, even though there are melodies in it, usually those melodies aren't, leading it. They still tend to be more textural. I think we have sort of realized that if we do that, then if we don't have that live, it doesn't take away from the song. Um, Whereas if we had like a keyboard or a guitar or something, um, filling those parts, then if that's gone live, then you're going to really see the seams there. Um, and I don't know if that's what initially started the idea, though. Though to be fair, I mean, our first record has almost no noise at all. The first Great Falls record. Um, Actually, now that I think about it, the first Drum Machine Great Falls record has no noise on it at all. And the first like legit full length with a drummer has like the slightest of noise in towards the end. And I think part of that was my sort of desire to.
Well, it's got Stan on it too.
It does. It has Stan on it right at the end of one song, and then it has a tiny quiet sound from Andre at one point. But the noise from Stan is actually not over the song. It's just the end of.
Yeah, it's like having a guest musician for 30 seconds.
But um, but the sort of like I think desire back then was to really strip everything away and just be a band and just really like Steve Albini kind of just like this is what we can create. And just, subsequently after that, I think we have just sort of found more and more ways to add that back in. But again, adding it back in ways where it's not really load bearing, you know. Um, we don't want to play. I mean, earlier this year, Damien and I were trying to write a new song, and at one point it was very dependent upon a loop. That was just a loop that we're like, oh, we'll maybe do it with this, maybe we'll just have it in a pedal and then we can play to it, whatever. And after a while, that just like starts really falling apart for us and just kind of feeling like very antithetical to being in a band because all of a sudden you're just like hyper dependent on a thing that no one is playing to, or no one is playing rather. It's essentially like a fancy click track. Even though we did used to play with a drum machine, we just kind of were like, this is just really not working. Um, and again, it sort of comes back to the thing where, and maybe even partially, talking about bass, which is that, I write bass lines as late as possible. Like I write them, like we just recorded a song. I wrote those bass lines like 5 days before. We've had the song more or less completely written for over a year. And I wrote the bass lines like 5 days beforehand. And I think that a lot of the stuff that is maybe different in the way we approach noise is that we work so hard on the guitar that we work on the guitar in a way that is going to be the only instrument on the song. And so then when I come in with bass, I'm sort of like, essentially just finding ways to, finding those little spots where I can kind of do something that changes it a little bit. But then after that, like the noise itself is at that point, the noise itself turns into a nice to have rather than a need to have. And that was sort of like, speaking about this song earlier, like that we were turning noise into a need to have. And I don't want that. I don't want to have any connection with noise to a point where we can't play a basement, I think is what I've said before, like if we need a nice PA for a part to really sing, I don't want to play that part.
Yeah, it's just not worth. It's not worth it for us. We're not a band that has like, a setup every night. We're not like Neurosis or Sun or somebody who has like the backline they want and they know what it does and it's there available to them every single night. Like we don't know what we're getting. Like we have to be able to be totally cool with either playing a big club or a basement, and it has to work either way.
Yeah, and we can even be, we can even be, uh, not being punk rock about it, like sort of, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to take like, bad shows that no one comes to, but we certainly don't want to be the band that has to have like that sort of, exact right setup to play our songs. That would fucking suck. Like that's not, what I like about this is, like I, if I ever get to the point where I can't be in my band because we don't have like, PA
Harpsichord or something.
or like we don't have like monitors to listen to, or we don't
Oh
have
yeah.
mixing guy, or we don't have like proper in-ears. Like that's just that none of that appeals to me. That just kind of feels like, and maybe to pull it back to the topic at hand here is that that's something that I very much like about noise is that I know if Damien dies, which again, I will die too at the same time. Our hearts will just know.
Look how red I am right now. That's not a good sign.
What?
I said, look how red I am right now. That's not a good sign.
That isn't good. If Damien dies on this podcast, I'm sorry to say that I will you will have to see my suicide.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder what that'll
you
do
have
for
to put it out. You have to put it.
I wonder what that'll do for viewership.
I was gonna say it's got to spike your downloads.
I
A
mean,
little, I hope.
and anything would. So,
But as I sort of am wedded to Damien as far as like music goes, if, something were to happen or whatever, and I had to sort of pursue other music, I think that I would probably, maybe do a bedroom project, and then I would probably just do noise. Because it would be the only, way to sort of guarantee something that that still sort of brings that, like, I could play in a basement, like I don't need to be on a stage. Like, I don't have to worry about a barrier,
Yeah.
or anything. Like, I don't have to worry about a prop. I don't, like, I will, if I were ever to be the guy who shows up to a show and I'm like mad about the, you know, front of house guy or something, or I can't believe that, these are the speakers in the PA or something, like, I'll kill myself, and not just because Damien's dead. Um, but that's just, yeah. I mean, here, Damien and I are talking about, noise because it's one of the, multiple unpopular things that we enjoy. And, not to be saying what everyone knows, but, this makes us no money. We enjoy, no residual anything from this. So, you may as well be doing the exact thing that makes you happy. And there's just something about what we do and what we're trying to do, and also the noise aspect that just always feels, and maybe with what Damien was saying, like, always feels adjacent to the small, shitty, stupid things I saw when I was a kid that had a profound effect on me. Um, the show or band or guy or whatever that I saw, and I was like I would like to do that, you know. Um, and I would never want to be away from that. And at least noise gives me that option until the end of time, which I appreciate. Because I refuse to learn guitar. I will never learn guitar.
It's not worth it.
No, definitely not.
Well, I want to thank both of you, wise seen elders, for sharing some stories. I do have a final question though, since you're bringing up like pretension and all that as it relates to noise. Do you think that we can consider Philip Glass to be noise?
Well, I mean,
Because he is officially a composer that works in postmodernism that I know you were cool and you dropped out, but when I was at Purdue, my
mhm,
professor used to like have wet dreams about how amazing Philip Glass was and how he was changing the face of music. But a lot of the
mhm.
Philip Glass stuff that I've listened to at least sounds tangential to what we're talking about for noise.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely done noise stuff, but I mean, I know Philip Glass, worked with like Aphex Twin and stuff, right? Right.
But I think what I'm getting at, right, is like music scholars will look to somebody like Philip Glass and like, oh, look what this guy's doing. He's doing something that conceivably nobody else is doing. But this whole point of this conversation is this is happening, in weird basements and sketchy alleys and stuff with these random noise performers. So, I mean, is it different or is it just different because of that pretension that he is a composer working within what we've defined as this narrow postmodernism as a genre compared to you guys with samples and sounds and your iPod and
Sure.
your pedals, right? Like,
Well, I mean, I think that, like, if you take like, if you go back to some of the people we were referencing before, I think it's a just a it's a continuum. Like, I don't
mhm.
think there's really a hard um stop to that. I don't know Philip Glass's stuff enough to, like, put it in terms of what we would consider maybe noise, but I do wonder if it does stem from a degree of, like, appreciation for, like, a minimalist noise project sort of needs to exist within the ecosystem of harsh noise wall for some reason. And but this is a good question that I don't actually have a very good answer to.
Yeah, I'm not certain either. I mean, people like Robert Fripp or John Cage or Pauline Oliveros or whatever, like, it's probably normal just to consider them like modern composers that borrow a lot of, like, have a pretty wide vocabulary when it comes to music and sounds and stuff. And again, a lot of these people came from that kind of experimental, kind of Cooper Union era of music in the, like, 60s, 70s, where people were just in New York City, like, Velvet Underground people were just doing like weird little performances of sounds and taped loops and stuff like that. So, there was, maybe they might have earlier in their lives kind of even spurred the genre on, and then maybe came back to it again, like came back around on it. People like, thinking about people like Robert Fripp, John Cage and stuff, who maybe started something and then let it like kind of burn over on the side here while it became this other whole unique thing.
Yeah, and I don't know, like I'm thinking of like what is it, like Penderecki, who does he does that like Threnody for the victims of Hiroshima or whatever. I mean, that is like horrifying sounding. It is fairly structureless in a lot of ways. Like it feels like noise with stringed instruments to me. But that is definitively in classical music. So I mean, well, yeah, I mean, I would say that maybe there some sort of line is the willingness to allow I don't want to say improv is really where it stops. There's just Philip Glass is too talented for noise music. Is this what we're saying? I don't know.
No, it's just like, so if my argument could stand and we could consider him to be a noise artist, and I could go to a public library and check out his CDs, then is noise really the underground anti-music that we've kind of set up for the entire hour that we've been talking?
Yeah.
Well, it's the closest we can get, I think. Like I don't think nowadays where grind has now or there's like 13-year-old girls doing like death metal pig squeals on YouTube. So it's hard to, I think, say anything can be so out of the mainstream. I mean, our breaking down of a monoculture means that there's probably enough people out there to support, literally anything like that. But I think that I mean, I don't know how you get more anti-music than sound that is not music.
Yeah.
I feel like that is irreducible. So it may be less of that it is, this anti-music by design, and it's more just it's anti-music because that you can't get more anti-music than no music. I don't know.
I think if I was saying something was noise, I would like a project, or a person, if I was saying like, oh, they are a noise artist. I don't think Philip Glass would work for me because he works too much in like traditional musics, even though he borrows from like,
Okay.
he's definitely a more experimental and I'd say minimalist kind of modern composer. Johan Johansson, who passed away a few years ago, modern composer / soundtrack artist. Great stuff, and he utilizes a lot of like stuff that like traditionally like kind of noise or experimental stuff does. On that Orphe record, there's tons of he has physical tape loops. And in fact, you can see live performance of him playing that record on KXP, and they have like the actual tape machine playing that they're like, those like little samples are coming on is actually from a tape being played at a certain time. There's like a lot of people borrow from that stuff, but when I think about like a noise artist, they really can't have too much music at all. If there's anything too musical happening, I'm just like, oh, that's something else. Like, oh, that's actually black metal, or oh, that's actually just experimental music or something. Like, I'm not trying to be like extra like gatekeepy or pure or anything with noise, but I think it really needs to be pretty like anti-music. Like it needs to be music adjacent at best. Like it's just texturally, and I think we all want it to be that. I think we do, because I think when you start combining music and noise together, you start at least from what I enjoy with our music with Great Falls when I listen to our records, like when I hear that stuff, that's just like fun stuff for me, for my ears to hear. I enjoy it. It's interesting. It's to me a little more sophisticated, a little bit more a little more delicious. That there's something kind of bitter right there with that sweet riff, whatever.
Well, either way, gentlemen,
those name
thank you for spending time with me. I hope
Yeah, have fun editing that one.
I learned stuff in this, so that's important.
Well, I apologize for any mistruths I may have said.
Cool. Well, thank you, Eric.
More